No, she's out of town.
I took a header yesterday.
This is Johnson's Agriculture Beekeepers.
Okay, I'll try her again in a little bit. Good evening, everybody. And this is August the 5th meeting of the Camden Charter Commission, and we are getting started. Karen Grove is out of town, and Nancy Cottle Johnson will be joining us by phone. I will try her again in a minute. First thing on our agenda are the minutes from the April 21st and June 23rd meeting. Unfortunately, I forgot to do the minutes back in July, so we have two sets of minutes to do instead of just one. Are there any corrections to the minutes of April 21st?
Did not see anything. I wasn't here. So I didn't.
Found typos. Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
I abstained. I wasn't there for that meeting.
If you weren't here, you can't
You have to
second
abstain.
or vote.
We'll take back the second and take my vote.
All right, I'll
Because he
do
wasn't
the
here.
second if it's needed then.
You can't,
All right,
can't
it has been
second something that
seconded.
happened when you weren't
All
there.
those that were present, please vote on approving the minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, minutes of June 23rd. Any changes, corrections?
Gene,
Yeah,
you misspelled my name.
I did.
If we're going to be like roommates, you should spell it right.
Sorry about that, Larry. I haven't known you that long.
The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
That's, yeah, it's my undercover.
Or to protect the guilty afterwards?
I'm right. What do you want?
That's good.
I'm all right.
All right. Other than correcting the spelling of Mr. Sargent's first name, are there any other comments? If not, I entertain a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
This is Johnson's Agriculture
thank you.
Beekeepers.
Appreciate that. Okey-doke. I thought we would take a little bit of time to talk about people's overall impressions of how the meeting on July 21st went, and I think it'd be a time to talk about if you have suggestions about how we might do it differently on the 18th. That would be good. So whomever wants to go first, give any impressions that you have or thoughts you have about the meeting? Yes,
I
Jim?
think all of us would share this, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but it might be somehow, can we suggest that the select board members who'd like to say something don't go first, and don't dominate the conversation? I'll leave that to the chair to figure that out, but I think that was, I don't know how I describe it, but it's unfortunate that happened that way.
The only other two people there were two select board people and.
Three select board, actually.
Who was the third?
Matt.
one?
Matt Siegel, Mark.
And Allison, you're right, correct.
And then Kathy Landau, Painter Landau, I'm sorry, Kathy, I apologize, and then Anita. I think we will have some more people. I heard from a couple of people afterwards wanting to clarify what time, what date the next public meeting was. And I did give Janice the notice to put out in the papers, the public hearing notice, and I think maybe it'd be a good idea if I send a quick blast to the media with just a brief press release, asking them to put it out there in print and whatever that we're going to have, that we're having our second meeting, and just give us a small recap. So I'll do that. And maybe, Jean, you could help me write something brief.
Okay.
Volunteer you to help me write something brief. Yes.
So do you want to address these one at a time?
Well, I'd like to see if there's any other response to the 721 meeting.
I think, kind of in response to Jim's statement there, I think we can do a couple things to try to get the conversation focused on what the issues are at hand rather than wandering around the landscape. And I think one of those things is, then this is going to largely fall on Deb's shoulders, but to remind people that we would like brief comments. You know, we're happy to hear what their opinion is, but 10 minutes is excessive, 5 minutes is probably excessive. And I think the other thing is that this is not a place where people should be campaigning to try to gin up a lot of interest about whatever their position is. It's a time to say, I have a question, I have a concern, this is how I view it. We're there to hear questions, concerns, feelings from individuals, not from representatives. I mean, because they're there, the select board members are there as citizens. They're not there as official select board members. It's not a select board function. And I think that I remember when we did Fox Hill, which was, public comment sessions that went on forever, and there was a continuing harping on, if somebody has already said what your opinion is, we don't need to hear it again because we understand that that's an opinion. And it's difficult because people want to be engaged. They're enthusiastic about it. They want to participate. But I think that's a way to respect everybody's time and give other people who maybe haven't said something an opportunity to say something.
I think that might be helpful if I sort of use the public hearing guidelines that are stashed back there and actually say, here are the guidelines we're going to use this evening because it is a public hearing. And I think if I do that, I think that will set the stage a little bit better because it was awfully informal, partly because we had so few people, but it became informal. And you're right about that being on my shoulders. So I'll sort of say, here are the guidelines for this evening's public hearing. And I think perhaps that might help. So good suggestion. Yeah, John.
But just building on what Laurie said, it's the balance of making sure that you allow the people to speak, even though they may repeat what somebody else said, because if you don't, they're just going to sit there and say, they don't care what I have to say.
Yeah, they could get up and say, I agree with Joe Smith. I think that I'm concerned about that too, or I think this is a good idea. So I think we could encourage that.
We can, but also people they like hearing their own words too. I mean, I know it's human nature, and this is what it's all about, bringing in the public and but ask them to participate in this meeting. It's not like we had 50 people and they all had the same agenda item or idea to say, okay, now can we have a spokesperson to start off the conversation, and then the rest could kind of chime in afterwards. That wasn't there that night.
Yeah.
But I think you did a good job. It's just a matter of certain things need to be.
Set up front.
Yes.
And I think part of that is our responsibility too. This is not a time for us to make speeches. This is a time to present the charter as it's been developed so far and explain things that might be confusing or people don't understand or whatever, and to really listen. I remember one time I asked Jim, this goes back multiple years when you were on the select board, why you don't seem to say very much. And you pointed to your ear and said, my last name is Heard. And I'm there to listen to what these people have to say. And I think that's a good attitude to have. We're here to hear what all you folks have to say because we've kind of talked all this stuff among ourselves frequently. So if we can do less of that and more of saying, okay, well, that's an interesting comment. We appreciate you coming.
Yeah, Mark?
Yeah. One concern that I have is over the past year and a half, we've gone over this stuff word for word. A lot of the people see one thing and suddenly they want to expand upon that one thing. And they don't know the conversations that have gone about that. And it may be repetitious to us, but it's totally new to them. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes you got to let them speak to get it out there what they're asking for, because they don't sometimes know what they're asking.
That's sort of I have to do some sort of facilitating,
Mm-hmm.
And definitely we are in a role of, if they have a question or they don't understand it, to respond and give them some background. But it should be pertinent background, not necessarily talking about ancient history from 30 years ago or 20 years ago, pertinent to what they're asking about. Yes, John?
But the other thing is, we do need to have a conversation with all of us in part of participating, because one, they haven't been there to hear how we got there, and that's some of the reason, what they're asking us to say is why and how did we get where we're at? Because there are some controversial, new things coming in with this charter.
Yeah, there are things that aren't unanimous, that is true.
But it's not even just, even they're not unanimous or not, it's still they're different from the way that we've been practicing.
Right.
So that's, a change is always hard. So let people know why you're thinking that way, even though it's, we're repeating ourselves sometimes, but I think that keeps the conversation going too. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
No, I see your point.
Yes.
The one thing I was talking to Juniper about before this meeting, using a PowerPoint, it doesn't seem that the camera can really pick this up well, what's up on the screen. Allison was trying to help out. What you do is you toggle back and forth between what's on YouTube and what's on the camera. So she suggested that I ask if Bruce, who is the gentleman who runs the system during select board meetings, can come and actually do that, because he's adept at being able to take, when I'm plugged into the system, it can go right from my computer on to the YouTube so people can see it, and then when people come up to speak, he can switch back and forth. And so I'm going to go into the town office and ask if we can have Bruce come and facilitate that. So that'll make anybody watching it on TV be able to see the PowerPoint presentation better than they would have been able to the other night. So we'll make that refinement as well. And I'll remember to bring a power cord.
Yes.
That was embarrassing.
Things happen.
Any other thoughts about the last meeting? Okay, thank you all very much. And if you think of anything, before the meeting on the 18th, please either call me or email me. I want us all to be able to have a good session with whomever comes on the 18th. So I'm certainly up to refining. Okey joke. Some specific topics. Some of these were, obviously brought up on the 18th, and one of them was forfeiture. And this is something that we spent a fair amount of time talking about amongst ourselves before we came up with the current version that we have. And we went back and forth and came up with what we have, but as a result of hearing some feedback, I came up with a suggestion, and it was one of the first ideas I think we had about how to do forfeiture, that actually whomever is not able to come to the select board meeting would contact the chair, and the chair would make the determination. As the language says, they would forfeit the office if they failed to attend 3 regular meetings any 6-month period without being excused. An absent shall be excused upon a finding by the select board chair that the written request for approval of an unexcused absence is reasonable. That's new. Factors to be considered by the chair shall include, but not limited to, attendance records, circumstances beyond the control of the absent member, professional or family commitments, and illness or medical treatments. That's all stayed the same. And then suggested the addition of all absences shall be recorded in the select board minutes as excused or unexcused. So nobody has to say in public that this person is not here because of X, Y, Z, in case it is something personal, and select board would know that you don't need to bring that up. The chair would say this person is excused. Anyway, yeah,
I'll admit, I got kind of tripped over it a little bit. I mean, we're all trying to do the right thing, but we're also trying to respect the people that volunteer to do whatever office they're in. And I think the chair should be the one to do this. I still think we need a mechanism of some sort, so if somebody really abuses it and doesn't pay attention and won't do better, that we have a way to move them along. But I think the first frontal attack should be the chair saying, okay, what's going on, in private, what's going on, talk to me, let's see what we can do to make this better, and go from there. I still think we need to do attendance like we did in the past, and it'll be there or not there, and then it'll be eventually up to the chair to find out if it's excused or not.
You don't think that this sort of takes care of that by the select board is the one who's making the finding?
I think everybody was just, they were very cautious about that we're just gonna pull somebody off a board or a committee because of, could be a legitimate excuse, but they're either, personal or whatever, and they don't wanna really discuss it, and there are those, that happens. We've only had one real bad one, that's one that happened several years ago.
Planning board with it?
Yes, it was, and it was probably, 10 years ago?
Ooh, not that many.
Not that long ago.
8, 10,
Yeah,
I don't know.
7 or 8.
But for the most part, I think it can be handled in-house, so to speak. They say, look, you volunteered to do this. If you don't want to do it, step aside. We'll find somebody that wants to do it, whatever it is.
I see what you're saying, and we talked about that, but we're not coming up with anything that's draconian or harsh, because we are, many towns, most of the ones we've looked at, have a mechanism in their charter. Now, the select board could have a policy that the chair of the select board intervenes first. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the select board chair saying, hey, you haven't contacted me to talk about what's going on. There's nothing that would stop a chair from doing that.
Well, I
Yeah.
think, emotionally, I agree with what John's saying, but the reason that we have a charter is to codify this stuff, okay? Because what you don't want to have happen is 1 year, Joe Blow misses 4 meetings in 3 months with unexcused absences, and that person is allowed to stay on the select board. The next time there's a new select board chair, Susie Smith misses 3 meetings unexcused in the same time period, and she's relieved of her responsibilities. You can't, it's like having a policeman say, for you, the speed limit on this road is 40, for other people, it's 50. It's, the rules are the rules are the rules, and we hope that we never have to enforce them, but that's the reason they're there, is just in case we get into a situation, we don't have to scramble around and try to make something up to correct a problem that's injuring the town. And I think, John, you're right. I think in most cases, the select board chair would say, hey, you've missed a couple meetings for, no really legitimate excusable thing. You weren't sick, there wasn't death of a family member, whatever. Are you having trouble with the schedule? What can we do? We'd love to have you participate more. And I think that that's part of the chair's role, is to be kind of an elder figure, because they've been there before, to be a bit of a cheerleader, to keep the enthusiasm up so that everybody participates. But at some point, it's also rules-based.
And the other thing is, if the select board could reach out, if somebody's missed 2 meetings without contacting the select board chair ahead of time to say, I can't come for X reason, that would be a reason for the select board chair to reach out privately with the person who hasn't come for the last 2 times without contacting them to say why. So to me, this hits a middle ground, because we're not asking the select board to vote. It's just a determination by the select board chair. Yeah, Mark.
I think it does hit that middle ground. And the key words in here are excused absence. For anyone who's on our select board that goes 2 or 3 months in a row without attending meetings, someone's going to be talking back and forth about it. The people, the selectmen themselves, the chairman is going to be checking on it. And if it's unexcused, then they need to talk about it. If they are excused, then that's acceptable. That's what that says. If they are excused absences, it's up to them to decide how many you're going to allow for excused. Example, if it's a major heart attack and they're in the hospital for 6 months, well, that's excused absence, but maybe they still want to replace them, or maybe they don't. But that's up to them to decide at that point in time. We can't predetermine what that emergency or excuse is going to be.
From what I heard, the other night, the biggest thing is the discussion stay private. We don't need a vote at the beginning of the meeting, because I'm not there, and they're going to say, okay, why, John's not here, not excused, you vote him not excused. We don't need that.
We're not doing that.
I know, but that's what I got out of Liz.
That's what they thought was going to be there.
Right.
It's not there.
And I agree with you. I agree.
And it's not in this middle version. But I understand, you would hope the chair would want to intervene at some point and reach out to their,
And that's true
select
of
board member.
Boards too, not just the select board.
Absolutely, every committee.
Versus trying to make something, because it might be very, I don't know, simple, whatever's going on, I don't know what the word is, but.
Well, if it's the select board chair that does it, it certainly eliminates the concern that people have about privacy. So even I'm sure the select board knows what's going on. It's a small town. You can't help not. Yeah, you know that, John.
I don't know nothing, as they say.
So is there?
Bob told me all about it, I can tell you.
There you go.
The select board should be the person to involve themselves with this, and not the entire select board?
Well, we should say an absence shall be excused upon a finding by the select board chair that a written request for approval is reasonable. And we don't say that they vote on it. We don't say that they discuss it at the meeting. It just says that the absence will be recorded in the minutes as excused or unexcused.
What would the written request of approval, what are you looking for there?
Well, the person sends the chair of the select board, I've got the Delta variant, I'm not coming.
And they send
Or
them
I've
an
just had my
email.
appendix out,
Yeah.
I can't come, or my, whatever, they would contact the select board chair, we say in writing, send him an email, so there's something in writing, and,
But in most cases, if you're not gonna be at the meeting, if you send it to email, you're just unable to attend. And that's probably about all you're gonna say.
well, that's quite possible, but with this,
Yeah, I know.
they would need to tell the select board chair why they can't come.
It doesn't need to be super detailed. I
I'm
can't
sick.
come tonight, I'm sick. We don't,
Or,
and
yeah,
I-
my father's
I think
sick.
There is a great responsibility to the town. The voters put their faith and trust in the members of the select board to do their work as best they can. They get paid to do their work. And I don't think it's anything unusual to send an email to the select board saying, I'm sorry, I can't come tonight, I had a death in my family, period, that's it. You
Or
know,
have a family member ill. Is that, do you feel that's invasive, or are you wanting them to talk to them on the phone rather than written? Okay.
Well, I think you need to have the written
Over
record
the years-
because to verify that you've got multiple ones. Otherwise, you're going to say, geez, I thought they called. No, they didn't. I don't remember,
Most people let somebody know.
Yeah, like you said, small town, and
Most
you're friendly
people-
with somebody else,
Well, most people would let the chair of the select board know, not just be just a no-show, I would think.
well, just say unable to attend, and we could discuss later what may be going on if it's more than once.
And if there's three unable to attend, the chair of the select board might want to get in contact with that select board member and have a private conversation with them.
Maybe two, when it's one
Yeah,
right
yeah.
after the other, but still, because I notice, like, you got meetings set up, and somebody doesn't show up, and it's something you'd want the whole board to discuss and vote on. So all of a sudden, now you're tabling it to another meeting, and hopefully everybody shows up, and it just messes everything up.
And a lot of stuff the select board does isn't concluded in one meeting. So it's really important that you remember what the previous discussion was because it'll follow through sometimes.
So why don't we do this, if everybody agrees, so we'll put Deb's last suggestion through and see how that goes at the next public hearing. Does that sound?
Yeah, I think that we can say in response to concerns we heard, we're proposing a revision and see what kind of response we get from that. Yeah, I don't think we need to vote on that tonight. I think we'll just say, here's an alternative in response to some concerns.
So that's what we're talking about is whether or not we like this language in the
Yes.
top paragraph. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okey-doke. In the meeting, somebody brought up whether it was discriminatory to just allow a part-time firefighter to be the one to be on the select board. And I went back in all of our notes with conversations with Bill Kelly, and he actually, a little over a year ago, said that he did not find allowing only firefighter who's part-time to run for select board, he did not find that to be discriminatory. So that would answer that person who raised that issue. It wasn't you. You were concerned. I think there was talk about conflicts of interest, and
Okay, I have a thought on that. Where in the future, we may be going back to a full-time personnel for ambulance.
Oh.
It may be coming up in the future. To use the word just firefighter, maybe it could be emergency responder or something of that nature. Because it
oh, you mean if a firefighter's doing double duty, the job changes from,
you might have somebody, working for the town that lives in the town that becomes one of our EMTs.
You just write part-time firefighter EMS.
Okay, EMS, whatever the words are that makes that the same.
I have a question about that. What happens if we have a person who's a part-time first responder, EMT, firefighter, policeman, who's on the select board, and the alarm goes off? Do they leave the select board meeting?
And what it is.
Well, I mean, I think that's something we need to think about. We have no idea. I love that commercial on the air about, well, this is your RV calling you, letting you know there's going to be a tree fall on your RV at 2:30 this afternoon.
Yeah.
But we have no idea when emergencies will occur. They just happen.
That's it.
I mean, do you want,
You deal with it at that point.
what does that mean?
I mean,
They
somebody may
make the
leave.
decision at that time.
I'd like to speak on this just a
Absolutely, you
little
should.
bit. I've been on both sides of it, and I want to tell you a little story. The reason that police department or emergency responders wasn't put on there, because back we used to have 40 firemen that were all call firemen. Even the dispatchers at the fire station was never one to be, unless they was a call fireman when they wasn't dispatching, allowed to become a selectman. We did have one fireman that became a selectman, Jim Hall. Do you remember that episode?
Yeah, but I was selectman, and Jim Elliott was selectman.
Yeah, but
We were all part of the department.
Jim Hall, you responded to alarms
Yeah.
when you was a selectman. Now, if it was a serious thing, a building was on fire, you responded. It never happened probably, so you never responded. That's common sense. But with Jim, if you miss meetings down there, you also get a letter saying you either shape up or ship out, one of the two. Simple as that. And so it went on 3 or 4 months, and the secretary sent him a letter from the fire department and said, you've been dropped from the rolls of the fire department for lack of attendance. Jim was a selectman up here, so we come back to the selectman, he says, I've been fired from the fire department, which I've been in for 10 years because I'm a selectman. Okay. Selectman says, let's get the chief up here and find out what's going on. So I took his roll call for the 2 years. I think he was on for 3 years. And in 2 years, he had never responded once to a fire. I didn't care that he was a selectman, but you're a selectman on a Monday night back then for 2-3 hours. You don't come to fires. I don't care. But on the other 2 Monday nights, and you're sitting home in the living room, you come to a fire. Or during the day, you come to a fire. He hadn't been to a fire for, I don't remember the exact, like 15 months. He hadn't never been to a fire. He'd been to 2 drills. And I brought all that information up and give it to the Board of Selectmen. And I left here happy because they told him, Jim, it isn't the fact that you're a selectman, there's nothing to do with that, it's your attendance at the fire station. It was simple as that, but back then we had 40 members, now we've got 22 active firemen down here. And I do think that if you put all responders underneath that, if they're a fireman and an EMT, they come underneath being a firefighter. If you put responders, emergency responders underneath that, you're going to open that up to a lot of people in the highway department that are firemen, in the police department, even the sewer department would want to, one of them might want to run as a selectman. That's why it was only firefighter. It was put in there.
Be as specific as possible.
Yeah.
Well, this goes beyond, what are the rulings for any town employee being a selectman?
No, you can't.
Can't.
I mean,
You can't, because there's a conflict, definite conflict.
okay,
The city is, the town of Camden is paying that person,
okay.
so they can't sit on that board. Now, the firemen, when this all started, I think we were making 75 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking years ago, but there was some firefighters down there that served, like John, up here in a good manner. And what used to bother me was when a selectman that was a firefighter didn't go along with what the fire department wanted. But that is, you've got to give that person credit for standing up and saying, I don't think that's right.
Okay.
When a call comes out on your pager, your gizmo there,
Yeah.
does it tell you big fire, little fire, cat up a tree? I mean, if a select board member's sitting up there and they're a volunteer firefighter or a part-time firefighter, and their device went off, would they know how big of a problem it was by looking
Yeah.
at the device? Okay,
Definitely.
so there's a little description there. of what's
Oh,
going on.
yes.
Okay.
Even today, with only having 23, we're having an average probably of 8 people at a call. And if it's an automobile accident, 8 people can cover that. That's not a problem. If it's a structural fire, or if it's a mutual aid fire, where you've got a big building going on in Rockport or Lincolnville or Rockland, and you take a truck with 8 men on it out of Camden, then you got to listen up, because if anything else comes in, you know there's not going to be anybody here.
Not many guys left to
But
fight something.
They got to use common sense, and while they're here for their 3 hours on a Monday night, that's their responsibility to be here. And I think it's always been used in that manner. Don't you, John?
Yeah, it was, yeah, and Chip and I had to resign because our meetings conflicted with the fire department training sessions. Remember that, after many years, and we couldn't attend, and what, like you said, if you didn't attend meetings at the fire department, you could be asked to leave. Well, it wasn't fair for the chief to say to somebody, you weren't here, so you're not gonna be here. So Chip and I are up here all the time too, so we both had to resign because it wasn't fair to everybody at the time. I miss it. I still miss it.
But back then, we had 40,
Oh, yeah.
and we had a roll call.
There was
When I got done as
65.
chief, I had applications on my desk for people that wanted to join the fire department.
When I joined, it was 65 members and with a waiting list.
60
And a waiting list.
and the chief.
So where does this leave us? The current language is a part-time only one member of the select board may serve in any 1 year who is also a part-time employee of the town of Camden. A part-time employee shall be an employee who regularly works less than 20 hours a week.
Right.
And we said, okay, that could still be conflict of interest, but we like the idea of having our firefighters, we don't want to discourage somebody from being either one. So that's why we put in the exception for firefighting. Where are we on that? I'm not quite sure where the discussion is
That was put in
going.
there, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that was put in there because Arthur Crockett worked for the town of Camden cleaning the Opera House. For some weeks it was some pay area or something. It might be 6 hours or 10 hours, and the selectmen chose that 20 part-time. They're not, with the
So
insurance.
that's why they had the 20 hours. We upped it to 30, less than 30. So where are we on this? Are we going to just leave this and see what, if anybody else brings it up that there's
With the
concern?
20 hours in, right?
No, we have 30. Now, are we going to leave as we have it now, that it's only a part-time firefighter is the only part-time employee that can be on the select board?
Well, you could have part-time employees, Parks and Rec, part-time employees on the snowball during the summer, winter, I mean.
Yeah, but we talked about that if they're on the select board, then they're effectively approving their own job position and all that kind of
Which
stuff.
is why it's part-time, because it isn't as big of a conflict if it's a full-time. I mean, the current charter doesn't allow anybody unless they work 20
I
hours.
went along with the
less.
30 hours, but I think 20 was better.
Shall we make a note that is the consensus sort of, let's keep it as it is and see what happens on the 18th, if there's any more conversation about it. If somebody comes up and says, oh, I'm a part-time so-and-so and I work, 30 hours and I would like the ability to do that, let's.
As it is 20 hours?
No, as it is, as our current charter in force, our charter that's in force now is 20. Our proposal is part-time firefighter, we define part-time as less than 30 hours.
32 is a big one, isn't it, where the bennies and all that kick in? And that.
Over 30, yeah,
Over
over
32
30.
is
So
the
this is
working.
works less than 30 hours a week.
I'm going
It's
to
not salary.
agree with Bob, and say I'd say back it off to 20.
Yeah, I'm with Bob, too. Less than 20 and only firefighters, not anybody else.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm good with that.
okay.
Yeah, 20 hours sounds good.
Do you want,
Okay.
okay. And we can add that to the list of things after the next meeting. We'll have a meeting to say, these are the things we're changing, these are the things we're not changing. Okay. All right, thank you. Vote on the budget. There was quite some conversation in our public hearing about open town meeting versus secret ballot. And the thought I had was for us to leave the proposed charter the way it is, which is maintaining the open town meeting, but to have the select board put on the November ballot a non-binding, sort of a preference question, as I stated it here, basically saying, shall the select board evaluate changing to the vote on the secret ballot, changing to voting on the budget by secret ballot versus open town meeting. It's not saying, do you want to, yes or no? It's, do you want the town to evaluate it? So we can be open, the town can be open to hearing what people think, because for 2 years they voted by secret ballot. I've heard from a couple of select board members that like that. We've had a consensus here that we were proposing to continue our open town meeting, but we're getting some blowback. So the thought is, put it out there as a non-binding, do you want the town to take a look at voting on the budget by secret ballot in the future? John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I am wicked torn on this because I understand 100% why we're having it at the Public Safety Building, because you're going to turn out, you're going to get, and we've been looking for that for years. I mean, I was hoping that 1 year to see that place full, that's like 500 people, I believe, with the auditorium. But we never did. I think the biggest one was Mrs. Knight's deal with the eminent domain. I think that was the biggest crowd I think I saw, other than the Miller thing back.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that was
I remember that.
89.
That was at the high school.
I missed the discussion and the opportunity for people to get up and talk, and that's what it's all about, So I don't know where the balance is, but one thing you gotta do, you can't, like you said the other day, flip-flop. This year, we're gonna have it in the upstairs, and next year down there. We're gonna make a decision, we're gonna do it, and stick to it. But I still say that it should be written in there somehow, maybe if something fails, a department or a section of the budget fails, that then has to go to an open meeting at within 30 days, say, of a failure or something like that.
And some towns have that. I mean, all this non-binding thing is to put in motion doing all the homework on how do towns do it. I mean, you all have copies of how Wales does it, how Kennebunk does it, how some other towns do it. Kennebunk, for instance, I think they got 2 more chances to have a town meeting to get it passed. And it reverts, if it fails, it reverts to last year's. But I think all of them require future votes, and I don't know whether they say open town meeting or not, but the point of doing this is just say, do you want the town to even pursue talking about this? That's all I'm suggesting they put on the ballot, because I think that is such a big change to how we do things, that there really has to be a lot of open discussion, so those points of view can come out. And suggestions of how other towns do it. I mean, Kennebunk has 2 public hearings before they decide the final number that goes on the printed ballot. Wells mails out a 48-page booklet to every household in the town of Wells, giving all of the financial information in the proposed budget before they have a public hearing on the budget. I mean, they really do a job of promoting what the budget is to
We
get.
used to do that too. We used to have the highway department run around and deliver the town report before the meeting.
Now everybody just has to come pick it up, and
No, they don't.
they do or they don't.
I've gotten last year, so this year.
I do, but I mean, I used
Come in-
to take a case at a time with me and
Yeah.
dole them out, because people, you know,
Well, I think of all the things we've chatted about as potentially changing in the charter, this might be the closest to the heart of how the town works, an emotional issue. Because it's kind of, if all the town meetings I've been to, and I acknowledge I've not been the best attender, but the bulk of the conversation is about the budget. You know, should we buy this? Should we buy that? Can we get it cheaper? People participate in that discussion, and I think there's a lot of people that would be very sad or reluctant to give that up. At the same time, we know that if we have a secret ballot, you know, what do we get on average, 2,000 voters or more? I mean, we get
More, yeah.
a whole lot more than we get at the town, you know, four times more, 5 times more, or 6 times more than we get. So it's a better measurement of the temperature of what people think, but it doesn't allow for that discussion. And I think, too, we've got to somehow put in a mechanism so that should there be, or when there is, another emergency, statewide emergency of some kind, that we don't have to sit here and say, okay, how are we going to handle it this time? We can look right to whatever this new suggestions are put together, if it is studied, and say, okay, it says that if an emergency is declared before this date, then we have to do it by secret ballot or something. It'd be good to have some kind of framework.
And I think that would come in whatever study is done about going to secret ballot first or staying with open town meeting. And we're not proposing to change that. It's just, here's a way to gauge interest.
first thing is, we need to figure out a way that the budget committees, you know, put on how their recommendations are in a better way. I mean, this, even though they were on there in those little blurb and $49,000 different, whatever, you know, you're asking them, well, we're going to say 11, but right now we've got 20-something people we're asking to invest their time in the community, and it's like, okay, we've made a decision, but it's not being presented. So that needs to be figured out in a better way.
If it were going to be on a secret ballot, you mean, to
Right.
have it, to have more detailed, more information on there.
You know, why there's differences in lines and something like that. The other thing is, like I said earlier, is if there is some reason one piece doesn't, we need to be able to go to the town meeting, open floor, so we have a conversation about why people don't want it. Because you can vote it down a million times down there, but if you can get a conversation going, okay, what's the problem? What can we do different? You know, that's, I think, is a big deal. The third thing I forgot, it was gone. I'm
No.
losing it.
Well, see, if the select board, if people say, yeah, let's explore it, and they form a committee, the select board does it, then come and express all of that, what you've just said.
Yeah, it's and you know where I'm at. My big thing is to protect the citizens' participation in this town government, one way or the other.
Yeah.
You know, the opportunity. If they don't want to come down, that's fine. But if they want to be part of it, the opportunity needs to be there for them to be part of it.
Okay. So the thought is, well, I'm not sure exactly what to do. We can say in the next meeting that as a result from conversations, we have a suggestion, we're not changing the charter, but we're suggesting a straw poll to see if they want, just say in response to the last meeting, and to see what anybody else says at the meeting on the 18th.
Why not just keep it a straw poll, very simple, and say to the general public what they're voting is, do you want to keep the present town meeting form the way it is? Or do you like staying the way we are with the, that way, I mean.
Well, the problem with that is, I think that it needs to be explained. There needs to be a public process so people can see how other towns do it. Do you like it? You don't like it? I think just asking the cut and dried question, even though that has a lot of appeal, it's simpler. You're not giving the voters the opportunity to be educated about the pros and cons.
Well, I think too, the way we got here, John, is because of the COVID. For 2 years in a row, we weren't able to have an open town meeting because of the disease. So to say, okay, let's decide secret ballot versus town meeting, I don't think that's going towards the right solution. I would guess it's likely sometime in the next 20 years, we're going to go through this again for some reason. And we don't want to have to go back to the drawing board at that time and say, okay, what are we going to do? Do we have an open town vote, a floor vote on the budget, or do we do it by secret ballot? Let's some other work group have that discussion while these experiences are still fresh in people's mind, and they can remember what they liked about the secret ballot and what they liked about the town vote, and try to come up with a plan that says, we propose that we do it this way number one, but should an emergency happen, we're going to have to go with plan number two, and let them work on it. So there would be no change, but I think it's something that requires additional thought and study, and I wouldn't want to let the remaining remaining revisions to the charter that we've done to sit for the next year and a half or so while that's being studied. The select board met, a week or so ago to come up with a list of priorities, and it is a long list. So I don't know that should the straw poll say, yes, we think it's a good idea to go ahead and study this more. I have no idea what that means agenda-wise when people would be able to spend time working on it.
The other thing is the select board may say, no, we don't want to do a straw poll on November. Mm-hmm. This is a suggestion to the select board because we're retaining the open town meeting. This is our suggestion. And the select board may say, nah.
Yeah, it's not a charter revision, so the select board has to approve putting it on the ballot.
Right.
But there was enough concern and questions the other night about keeping on the ballot. I felt that a lot of them
We're for putting the budget on the ballot?
Down the ballot, right down the things.
They don't want to go back to
Right. I mean,
to be
Yeah, I think
facing
there
the
are some
responsibility.
select board
well, I know
members.
from the members that were here, I felt that it was pretty much two anyway.
Yeah, the two that spoke.
Yeah.
The newest member didn't say anything one way or the other. So it's very possible they'd say yes, and we'll get Bill Kelly to write what it's going to say.
Yeah, and it's new waters for us, so to speak. We're all trying to not give up what we've been part of for years. And
Yeah.
it still means a lot to have that town meeting.
Well, the burden shifts to the select board to make sure that they do the right promulgation, to get people to come to public hearings in March, basically, before they decide what to put on the ballot, because, they vote in April to put what's on the secret ballot in June. So the burden sort of shifts to them to make sure people come and turn out in order to make sure people have the voice. So I'll just suggest at the meeting, when we get to that section on the PowerPoint, that here's a thought, and then just see if anybody in the audience has any feedback for us. And I've suggested on the term limits, we just wait to see if we get any more information, on the 18th. And we can get whatever feedback we have, and then we can have a wrap-up discussion ourselves about it.
Good points both ways, I thought, on that.
And again, size of the budget committee, let's wait to see if we get any more feedback, if that's okay with you guys. What do you think? Just,
I'd like to say just one thing on that. As Chief of Camden, I come up here night after night with the budget committee and had a lot of questions and a lot of explanations. I didn't have that with the Board of Selectmen. The people wanted to know what this change was, what that change was, why I took money from this account and put it in that account, and that, but I never got that from the Board of Selectmen. Usually when I went to the Board of Selectmen, they approved every single year for 27 years, my budget, just approved it.
because they're more in the know, perhaps, John?
Well, that too, and then, in most cases, the board members attended the budget committee meeting, so they heard the whole discussion, the questions asked, the answers. So you were ready. Plus, like you said, they had the other side of it too.
Well, that's why, in one way, Bob, what you're saying is that the open voting on the budget in an open meeting allows people who aren't on the budget committee to come and ask those questions.
Or the selectmen, if they want to come and sit on a budget meeting, they learn while the question was being asked and answered at the budget meeting.
Yeah, the budget committee is,
So the budget committee, I think, is very vital the way it is, but
well, I certainly don't want to get rid of the budget committee.
No.
So this is all sort of, we'll just kind of update on the 18th. I'll go through my PowerPoint presentation and see if I can sort of just put some of these here. This is some feedback from the last meeting, see if we get any response. So the other new thing, the state, and I sent all of this to you back in July, the state did pass this MRS 30A, which is the statute that governs municipalities, 403B, and I sent you all the law, which is this long, that gives the requirements for if you are going to have any remote meeting participation. And I think we need to have something in the charter that says the select board may adopt a policy, and that's all that state law says, that the public body may adopt if they follow this list of requirements. And rather than saying they will adopt a policy or shall adopt a policy and listing what they are, just say they may adopt a policy if they follow the law.
I have no problem with participation, but what about the vote?
I mean,
Board member to be able to vote not being present, I don't agree with that.
that's state law.
That allows it?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
And they're talking committee meetings, not select board meetings.
Well, they said
correct?
public body,
Which is the select board, and
Okay.
which could be select board, planning board. I mean, actually, we're a public body. But it also requires that a physical location be available for the public to participate in. Somebody has to be able to come, and there's only a person can participate, a select board member can vote and participate, but it isn't just in case you want to stay home tonight and have your supper,
what's to say?
and there's some specific reasons, is if you can't get back in town because you've been out of town traveling. I mean, it's very specific, it's very tight. It's not if I decide I just want to stay home tonight and it's too cold and I want to vote on the select board stuff from home. That's not allowed by state law.
Whose responsibility to regulate that? Now you got the chair that's going to, for attendance, and now you got the chair that now is going to say, okay, I decided to eat my oatmeal, so I'm not going to come to the meeting tonight,
That's all in the state law.
But if it's state law, then we really don't have, other than just put it in there.
just to say that you may if you follow the state law.
But on a practical level, if there's no state of emergency, regular routine meeting, one person is on vacation, one select board member is on vacation, and they would like to participate remotely, how do they do that?
Zoom.
Well,
But they've got to
that,
set up a Zoom for
Yeah.
everybody?
They're gonna have a
they're going to have to
hybrid
make,
system.
they're going to have to make this room, as I would say, Zoomable,
It's gonna be a hybrid system. That's what they're building right now.
where 4 people could be here and one person,
On
right,
a flat screen TV on the wall, and there they be.
and there they are.
There,
And would that, if there was a select board member who's going to be on vacation, and the select board says, okay, we're going to allow this hybrid situation, is that on a meeting-by-meeting basis? You know,
I can't
If you
remember
have the
all
Board
of
of
it.
Zoning Appeals said, hey, one of our members is out, then does the select board have to bless that?
It just says public body, and
Yeah.
each public body may adopt a policy. I see no definition of public body. It doesn't say municipal officers or anything, and the interpretation of that is going to be up to, I think, Maine Municipal Association is trying to write some guidelines now. It'll be up to town attorneys to advise the public bodies if they're going to adopt a policy, what it means. And we're not doing that. We're just saying, follow the law, but that the law exists.
that makes sense.
All right.
Leave it at that.
That's all we're saying. You may do it, but you got to
If they
meet
don't
the
like it, we
requirements.
just say Deb said.
Is it prudent for, this MRS 30A, 403B, et cetera, is still in process, if MMA is still writing guidelines for it? It might be, it's like Congress passes a law on taxes, but then the IRS writes what it really is, and then the courts interpret what it really is. And it's a little bit like the state passes a law, MMA says, okay, this is how we're going to interpret all this is how you would apply it.
They gotta go back to the
Some
law.
politician make a famous statement.
No, so my question is, does it make sense for us to have this language in the charter at this time? Or should we wait to see what MMA actually says?
What I'll do is I'll ask I will ask Bill Kelly, our town attorney, if it is too soon to include something like this in the revised, because this could be added a
Right.
year from now if necessary. It's just the thought. I was actually asked by the media if we were putting anything in the charter allowing them, and I said, it all depends on state law.
But this is already a voted on statute, right?
Yes, and the governor signed it back on
Okay,
June
so this law-
23rd.
It's law.
This law exists
So
now.
whatever Maine Municipal does, it's going to be a lobbying effort on the legislative body to change some part of it, but it's still going to be that law.
Right,
So why not just
403B.
include it as it is right now? I don't like it, but
'Cause
it's what it is, what it is.
I'm guessing if may is highlighted and underlined,
No, that was me.
I understand. I'm guessing that because there may be a choice between may and shall.
And the state law is may,
Right.
Okay.
it's not shall.
Well, but
But this,
obviously it's optional,
It is.
okay? So what I'm saying is, we don't really know what this law says.
but what we're saying though is that if we chose to go that route, this is what we've got to do. This is the guidelines.
Is vague, yeah. They're going to have to go by the guidelines. So but I will still ask BK if he thinks it's just too soon. As vague as this is, I mean, it doesn't say what the law is, it just says there's a law.
It's a law.
That's all I had for the agenda.
We already have a section in here that we've discussed before that somewhere in all of this that everything is pending on what current state laws are.
Yes, that's true.
Already covered somewhere.
It is basically that if the state passes a law and it's not in our charter, we still have to go by whatever the state law is. But this is, such a new thing. I think it's modernizing our charter to recognize what the new things are.
But also, individual jurisdictions are allowed to make laws stricter.
Right?
We can't make them more liberal, we're allowed to make them stricter. So if, for whatever reason, if Rockport looked at this and Rockport said, hey, we want to make the select board shall adopt the policy, yada, yada, yada.
We don't have to follow what another town does. There will be
Right.
guidelines, but
That's my question, is without knowing what the nits and gnats of the law are, it's hard to decide. So I would side with you saying, maybe it's a little too early, but let's see what Bill says.
the law is as big as this piece of paper. It fills up the whole page. And it's pretty specific about the reasons why somebody can vote remotely. But we'll just see what BK thinks it's too soon. That's fine.
I believe it's a practice they're already going to do, because I was talking to one of the members today, and I won't say which one, that it's going to be on vacation. They intend to be attending the meeting Zoom or whatever, not this one, but the next meeting when they're gone. And so I think it's a practice that's already there
Interesting,
because of state law.
interesting. So our next meeting, folks, is scheduled for the 18th, 5:45 here, our next public hearing,
Which is a Wednesday.
which happens to be a Wednesday, not a Thursday. I know this was unusual. And if anybody is watching this on YouTube, please remember that you can send any questions to us via email and the email address is charter@camdenmaine.gov. And any questions you send in, we would be happy to share and/or answer in the public hearing. So if you have any questions, email them to charter@camdenmaine.gov.
So the 18th is the next meeting with the public?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no meeting on the 11th.
Right.
Okay, and then have we scheduled a meeting after that to discuss whatever we heard on the 18th?
We have not. Shall we do that?
I won't be here on the 18th.
You could,
You can Zoom,
you could
John.
I'm
participate.
going to be in Rockwood by Moosehead.
Very
I don't
good.
think I'm going to be Zooming anything.
To go up there.
I'm taking 2-3 days off.
Oh, come on.
Good for you.
My son had rented a cabin up there, and he asked me if I'd like to come up, and I'm getting my fishing gear together. It'll be the first time I've been fishing this year. I'm headed north.
Good for you, John.
Yeah.
I need to get
You
out,
deserve it.
I just need to go somewhere.
I could meet on, if the coast is clear based on the town calendar, I am going to be out of town starting August 26th through September the 12th. I will be
Question,
available.
That-
question. Do we have a time deadline to get anything on the November ballot? with the
September
selectmen?
21st,
September 21st?
yes.
Okay.
I would like, and I have no issue with, I would like us to be able to give them fair warning that this is coming and this is what's coming to them. And I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because if this gets on the November ballot, the law is that in order for a charter to become effective, the total of the yes and no votes has to equal 30% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial election. And that equals a number of 993 total votes, yes and no, added together in order for the vote to be valid. Even if it passed 2-1, but the total votes didn't add up to 993.
And that could be a problem, because this November is not.
Well, I asked for the last numbers, not including 2020, because that was a presidential election. In 2019, we had 918 people vote. 2018, we had 3,310.
But that was an off year on, as far as a governor or senator or anything like that.
And 2017 was 1,921.
But I've also seen 6, 7 on the off.
And we've seen that in June,
Yeah.
when there's not a primary or an election, so that could be problematic.
What did we have this past June? We
It was
had-
way high.
Yeah, it was way high.
Way
And
high.
there was no
Yeah, there was something
there
on there.
was.
I can't remember what it was.
school
but-
budget, that was it.
No, there wasn't. There was something on there.
There was, and I can't remember what it was either.
But it was a drawer.
So it would have to go to them by the 21st.
What
and-
happens if they don't, we got to re-vote it again?
Yep.
If we don't hit 900 people?
We don't have 993 people. We'd have to put it on the June
1,000
ballot.
people, we got to do this over again.
It'd have to go on the June ballot.
Which will be the
Engineering?
primary for the upcoming governor's race, because the next November, a year from November is the governor's election.
Yes.
And we'll also have the Central Maine Power thing on there too, so that'll be crazy.
Over the corridor?
I don't know if it's a corridor or if if it's creating a public entity.
That's what it is.
And so, but that'll be a huge turnout.
Possible draw for this November is the petition about the CMP, about the power line.
Yes.
You know, revoking the
That's right.
permit
Yep.
for the power line coming through Maine.
And that'll be a draw.
That will be a draw. So, Lowry, you're like holding your head like you're trying to concentrate or
Well,
you're concerned about
I'm
something.
just propping it up. No, it's, when we take it to, one of the nice things about taking the select board, we just take the select board, we explain the process we've gone through and basically say, here it is, it goes on the ballot because we've satisfied the requirements to have it put on the ballot. Part of that is that wrap-up section. The final chapter, the wrap-up section.
The final report?
Like the Reader's Digest version of it, the consolidated version of it, that's still in process. So we can't be going up to the last minute to decide ourselves what we want to do, because whatever we decide to do has to be part of that.
Final report.
Final report.
Which is, that's what triggers, you hand the charter, you give them the final report. The final report is part of the charter. You hand them that, and they're by law required to put it on a ballot within 35 days.
Yep. So we just need to make sure we leave ourselves some room in there for the final massaging and editing and.
Well, it's gotta be further back than 35 because we need 45 for absentee ballot. Right?
Which is why it's September 21st. I mean, I could be wrong on that 35.
We need to get to the printers and get it out there in time.
That's why September 21st is the drop dead date. I asked Katrina for the
Right.
drop
But I
dead
mean,
date.
the earlier we can get it to the printers, the better,
Right.
because it gives people opportunity to see it.
Well, we may have another public information session after it's put on the ballot, so we could, and make sure there are more copies out there to promulgate it, and to have another public session or two. I mean, I'm certainly happy to do that. But do we want to try for August the 25th if the conference room is open to have our meeting? Because I'm gone for the next 2 weeks, and I will take my computer, and I will be able to do anything on the computer.
Instead of the 18th.
No,
The
we're
18th is the
having
public
18th.
meeting.
Our meeting.
25th is us to
I won't
talk.
be here on the 18th.
Let's schedule the 25th.
Yes,
25th, that's for us to talk about what we've learned and try to reach a
finalize
conclusion.
as much as we can.
Right.
Right.
And I will check the calendar with Janice. Town calendar.
Maybe I'll bring my computer with it. and Zoom in.
Make sure your battery's real charged if you're up there. You put a moose on a little treadmill to keep it charged.
That's right.
If we want to do a Zoom while I'm away, I'm happy to do that.
No, I hate Zoom.
Are you going to a scenic place?
Polly's on, yeah,
Oh,
going to
that'd
the
be
beach.
nice. In the background, you could have the palm trees and,
Well,
umbrellas
they're
and
not
stuff.
palm trees, yeah.
Wish you were here, guys, but here we are.
Okay. I will check to make sure we can do the 25th. Otherwise, we will see each other on the 18th, except for John, who will be relaxing up at Moosehead. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion, we adjourn.
All right, if you turn off your microphones for me?